Welcome to the Hostworks presentation today. I have to apologise about my voice. I'm on the tail end of a cold. Hopefully make it through. A little bit about me. I'm a platform engineer at Hostworks. Been there for about 9 years now. 2.5 years I've been working with OpenStack. I say working with, not working on. I am a systems administrator. I'm not a developer in any way, shape or form. I have got a fix that's been merged to master, and for that one line of code, you're very welcome. I started off as a Windows engineer, and now I mainly work with Unix. So, for those of you that don't know Hostworks, we traditionally play in the traditional enterprise managed service provider market. And what we do is we have contracts with our customers that specify what servers they want to run, how big is the server, what management level do they need on the server, what their names are, their networking details, any internet traffic bundles, blah, 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 all wrapped up. We also throw in their change management procedures, SLAs, OLAs, rebates, racing matrices. We're basically a full house when it comes to enterprise lingo bingo. Basically, what we do is we write down everything we'll run for you, how we'll run it for you, and then micromanage it with an ITIL framework. In terms of management level, we range from colo all the way up to full stack management, where we make sure that everything up to your code works. And if a customer wants to change something, there would need to be a contract amendment made. This would involve a few rounds of discussions and paperwork, and probably a few weeks for something to go from a request to a running instance. It's interesting to note that we actually have customers that we support in public cloud today, and we actually use this model where they actually have to request through us, and 2 weeks later they'll get their AWS instance. And we have people that actually still want us to use this model, and they still want all those checks and balances around it. But our sales team started finding these guerrilla programming teams popping up in customers' offices. Very focused on DevOps, blue, green, CI/CD, and very fast. And they couldn't handle going through the contract amendment process because it would just slow development to a halt. It's completely incompatible. So they started just expensing public cloud, and then they just kept on going. Initially, when we discussed it with their management, they said, it's not a problem, we just need to bring them back in line. But we all know that as soon as they get the improvements in technically and financially, they're going to keep going in that direction. What was holding a lot of them back was that they were relatively inexperienced at both operating system configuration and also architecting something for the availability requirements they had. They lacked some of those ops in DevOps. So the opportunity for us, we identified, was to change our model and work on assisting people into the cloud instead, and then provide consultancy services, because we already have people that are very qualified in Linux, Windows, SQL, cloud architecture and all that. So, in response, one sunny Monday morning, a few of us were pulled into a room with the COO to discuss whether we should look at internal cloud or push everything to public cloud. We decided that on-premises offering would be beneficial to customers because we'd have greater control over the pricing. Because it's in our back end, we could integrate it a lot deeper with our tools. And finally, although it's not a very cloudy thing to say, it would allow our customers to rack their own kit and then plumb it directly into a cloud of some description. We have some customers running Spark. Some customers insist on particular brands of networking equipment that they want attached to them. So it's just easier for us to do that, and we like to have a solution that fits for everyone. So in the end, we decided if we're going to go on-premise, we should also review how we managed other clouds and pull them under the same management tool set. Our CEO said, great, now go and build an auto-scaling WordPress instance on an on-premises cloud as a proof of concept by Friday. 4-day turnaround, no worries. And we hadn't even chosen which cloud platform to use at that point. So that was our first decision. Which way are we going to go? Well, the two ones we looked at were CloudStack and OpenStack. One of our team had actually previously built and operated a CloudStack environment, but he'd suddenly developed a violent twitch every time he mentioned its name. And OpenStack was going strong, so we decided that was the better choice. Remember, we only had 4 days, so we didn't have a lot of time to actually do proper analysis into this. Oh, yes. So we scrambled together some kit, built a very, very basic Juno install, got it done just in time. And the CIO signed off on it, and we went off to define 2 projects. One for the cloud agnostic management, and one to build a production OpenStack environment, which was requirements, resources, timelines, and the beer. So for every project I work on, we decide on a beer that is the goal at the end of it. And I had a chat with a beer maniac friend of mine, and he said that this was rather good. Gets incredible reviews, so I'm happy with that. So now we had everything ready, time to start talking to people. One thing we found immediately is that vendors were incredibly keen. As soon as we mentioned OpenStack, they got very in your face. I had one company put me in direct contact with their OpenStack developer team and had them pledge to me that they would develop and maintain a special fork of their code just for us to run. On a side note, internally we say that if it's not in master, it doesn't exist. So we don't want to touch anything like that. Another one suggested they fly us to San Jose for a couple of weeks to go and meet some people. And then one day I came into work and ended up having a chat with Randy Bias, which is a little bit different, not expecting that one. Unfortunately, we don't, and we still don't see a lot of OpenStack knowledge in the pre-sale space in Australia at the moment. Anytime we started asking anything more difficult than which OpenStack release they support, eyes started glazing over and we'd end up on a phone call to America the next day. And vendors are also a double-edged sword, we found. I was actually quite surprised that Heidi mentioned that avoiding vendor lock-in was one of the main things that people liked about OpenStack, because we found, in our experience, almost the opposite. When we started looking about storage, we wanted to look at what we're going to have on the back end. Whoever we choose there, we're stuck with them for as long as that device exists. And so you end up becoming quite dependent on their continued support for OpenStack and them keeping the features you need in their drivers. If they don't release drivers for the next version, you're stuck on an old version until they actually update it. We have a product that we had to deliberately void our support on because they only supported Kilo. Even now today, as far as I'm aware, they only support Mitaka. And staying that far behind introduced too many business risks for us, because security issues might not be backported, performance improvements to the code might not come through, and our own compliance to some external standards is at risk if we're not keeping up to date with the latest releases. The other thing we noticed is that a lot of companies like to say we support OpenStack or we are OpenStack compliant, but our experience is that yes, they're OpenStack compliant, but sometimes very specifically. Some companies would say we support OpenStack when it's more correct to say we support OpenStack as long as you're using Identity version 2. We still see that a lot, even though V2 is deprecated, they say things like that. We had one company had a really good product that we really wanted to use, but they said that we weren't allowed to use HTTPS in the environment at all, even for identity. Doesn't work for us. We had another one that claimed they could scale out further than any other competitor, but we're not allowed to have layer 3 gateways in the environment. We're only allowed to have layer 2 domains. And for a multi-tenant company, we can't, we need to get out. For most deployments, I generally nowadays recommend people just stick with whatever the defaults are, unless you've got sunk cost in equipment that you want to leverage, you want to sweat that a bit more, or you want some functionality that it's going to bring you that you can't get anywhere else. Okay, this slide's a little bit I don't think people like this slide very much. We came across quite a lot of bugs when we were deploying, and there were bugs that were fixed upstream. So if you have a bug, it's usually best just to pull it from upstream. Just cherry pick the commit and actually integrate it. One that we came across is with Heat. In the Liberty release of Heat, they dropped the Z to dictate that it was GMT time off API responses, which caused havoc for our internal systems because they thought everything was like 10 and a half hours off. But it's a lot simpler just to add a Z to the, edit the code, add a Z to it, and then just move on. Also, if you come across a big bug in fixing your environment, push it upstream. I've done my work. My one line of code is, I'm sure, is going to help somebody at some point. One other thing we learned, and we didn't realise for quite some time, is that features emerged early. I'm sure you guys are all aware of that. Just because something is in master doesn't mean that it's in any way stable. I think firewall as a service stayed in experimental for ages before it got pulled out. So this was the main thing that we had to do. One of the big things we had to work on operationally was to get everyone on the same mindset, because we come from, the company that I work for is 9 years of working in contracts, and that's the only way that we do business. So now we had to reinvent exactly how we actually imagine things. And we started explaining it to the other guys using the pet versus cattle analogy. Everyone knows that one? Yep. I actually don't like that analogy anymore because it doesn't cater for the wide range of servers that we actually see nowadays. There are, when we started talking about it internally, we started having that problem as well. And they started coming up with new terms. Dog that sleeps on the bed for a pet that you really like, which was cow with a name was cattle that you can terminate, but you'd be a little bit upset about it. One project manager even suggested we try and build a dog cannon to get pets into the cloud. Once we got to that point, we decided it's probably best to leave it there and just move on. What we moved on to was looking at the differences in management method. Could we move everything to OpenStack? For example, with our traditional enterprise instances, which are all pets, we patch monthly unless something bad comes out, back up nightly, monitor and alert on everything we possibly can. Availability SLAs are counted down to the minute. For OpenStack, which is heavily focused on cattle, well, we patch and update the images in Glance every month, so why not just redeploy the instances instead? And I wouldn't bother backing up a cattle server because it's disposable, I can lose it. And I'd monitor it, but I'd be more interested in whether the function's working rather than is everything on the server healthy. So there's two very different instance management models. And unfortunately, we also found that some types of workload are simply incompatible with cloud, whether it be ideologically or technically. Some workloads also have negative financial implications. For example, we're mainly a Microsoft shop. So we have to cater for a lot of Microsoft clustering services with failover disks. Has anyone used Microsoft here? I think I'm probably one of the only. Oh, no, we're good. Good. For those of you that don't know about Microsoft clustering with failover disks, is that it relies on low-level SCSI reservation commands to manage ownership of disks. So the disk is presented to multiple nodes, and then it will arbitrate who actually has access at that point in time. Having a node disappear permanently is a nightmare to fix as well. We could use iSCSI to present it, but Microsoft still don't recommend that you do anything other than fibre channel. And it's just not a very cloudy method. The recommendation is to move to HA groups. And now, if you're using SQL 2016, you can possibly use a basic HA group. But other than that, if you want functionality that is effectively the same as a Microsoft cluster that you have today, you'll need enterprise licensing and at least 3 nodes to maintain quorum. So now a customer that had a standard edition license and a 2-node Microsoft cluster, which, looking at the Microsoft website last night, is $3,700 American dollars, is now up for enterprise edition and 3 nodes, which you need 2 licenses at 14,200 each. So it doesn't make financial sense for them to actually move across to it. In addition, HA groups require you to connect to the database in a slightly different way, and they replicate in a slightly different way as well. So now you have to do full end-to-end testing of your application. So you're not just up for a lot more money, you're up for a lot more work as you try and smoke out some bugs. Speaking of money, we could probably bring up Oracle's database licensing at this point. It's okay on the big clouds, but OpenStack's still a bit stuck there. And as I mentioned before, we've got some Spark servers, and we don't think that that's going to work very well. So it became clear that in our company, we need both OpenStack and traditional enterprise, but we need them to work together, at least while our customers go through a re-architecture process. The next issue we had to tackle was figuring out what is actually running. Previously, we had a contract we could look at, and the contract would tell us what servers should be running, where they should be running, and we'll know everything about it, and it's easy. But now, our customers aren't very interested in a server, they're interested in the service or the function of that, and making sure that just the service and function is available. And that's nice for them, and it's certainly a language that we should use when talking to them, but as a provider, I still need to know which servers are actually providing that function. It's like that cloud is just someone else's computer thing. There are still servers there, and someone knows what they do, we don't. So they can call it a service, but I need to know what it's actually doing in the background. In the end, we developed a system off the messaging subsystem that will just, we pull out all notifications and do a bunch of tagging to figure out exactly what's going on. And the final and most unexpected change that we came across affected how we actually interacted with each other at work. So imagine the outer circle is the different teams in your company, and the inner circle are the different components that make up a functional instance. The networking team take care of all networking components, the virtualization team take care of all virtualization components, and the operating system and application components are handled by systems. And this is roughly how we work at Hostworks. It's a very clean delineation between teams. Everything's very nice and neat, and it makes allocating resources very easy. The issue we have with this system is that we find ourselves in situations where Team A say it's Team B's problem, and Team B says it's Team A's problem, and we go around and round for a couple of days. Has anyone had that kind of thing happen with them before? So we started seeing the edges getting a bit blurry. It started with the network team wanting to understand how the network portion of OpenStack actually worked, because they wanted to be able to trace packets from the instance through the operating system and out to the physical network. So they learnt Neutron and Nova. The systems team suddenly had the ability to manage the network subnets and ACLs all on their own. And the virtualization team was replaced with the OpenStack team. And as you know, we're responsible for everything from the platform processing packets all the way through to images and flavors and making sure that's all correct, we cover that large middle ground area. And because now all of our teams have some common ground, they also have some common understanding. The systems team don't have to worry about an ACL not getting done or working through that. They have a common language and understanding, and they can work through it a lot quicker. In fact, I actually haven't heard anyone say that's their job so far. Most of the conversations I hear now are the systems team go to the network team saying, I'm thinking of opening this ACL, what do you think? Which is a lot quicker and a lot happier for everybody. It's by no means a silver bullet. It's certainly created some additional issues, or challenges, I should say. Like we need to be more vigilant that a team doesn't overstep their boundaries and start causing actual issues as well. But we're getting there, and it's a lot smoother than it used to be. Okay, so operationally, we haven't completely solved all the issues we have, but we are getting there. We use automation to do a lot of the work. If you're not doing some form of automation, there's something wrong in the way that you're doing things, I think, nowadays. there are just too many configuration items between the operating system and OpenStack to try and do it yourself. The other major thing that we rely on is our development environment. Anytime you do an upgrade, you will break it at least once. I have broken dev innumerable times, usually through upgrades. And it's a lot better to do it in dev. It doesn't cost a lot to build one. You can reuse old kit, and it will save you many uncomfortable conversations and protect your relationships. In terms of how we do the monitoring, we actually Dockerized all of our components, and we use Docker Logger drivers to push everything out to an Elk cluster, and then we do analysis from there. We're looking at using Boson and Ryman to do some more smarts in there, but we haven't got to that yet. Soon. Operational tooling feels like it's been an issue in OpenStack for a while, and I don't think we're the only ones with this problem. Certainly talking to a few people around here, there seem to be some concerns around it. There is the OSOps group of repos, but it looks more like a dumping ground for people that have cool scripts than an actual a solution for us at the moment. I think it's been restarted relatively recently though, so we've got high hopes. If you know of a silver bullet to fix this, please let me know. Come and talk to me. I'm very interested. So, in early 2016 we launched. We started migrating with one of our smallest customers to dip our toes in the water. We talked to them about the move and they were fairly nonchalant about it. They just paid to have their website up. We were excited. That first one went well. Nobody really noticed anything, so we migrated more and more, including one of our larger customers. Hoyts run their website. They had the capability to scale up on demand, but it was manually triggered at the time. And we've taken them from that semi-automatic website to an all singing, all dancing, auto-scaling, configuration managed environment that takes care of itself now. In fact, today I've been getting messages all day saying that the environment's scaling up. And when I asked the guys about it, they said that Wonder Woman was released. So they're getting a bit more traffic today. And once their production websites have been migrated, we suddenly started seeing new shifts in our teams. I was talking to a colleague one day and we started getting notification that Hoyts was scaling up. And they said, it's probably just raining in Sydney. And I don't know whether he actually consciously did it, but he'd actually linked auto-scaling events with probable weather events at certain days and certain times. And I checked up and it was actually raining in Sydney. And our big data people started getting very excited about that. And now they keep asking me for access to our metrics, which is a good problem to have. How's the beer? I have no idea. We're 2.5 years in. I haven't had it yet. Not because we blew out the timelines, but because there isn't really an end to it. We're constantly testing new bug fixes, new upgrades. We get a lot of requests from the business to add new features because interest keeps on growing. And for us, it's critical to keep that momentum and focus because the releases are end of life after a year. So, and there's only 2 major releases a year, so we have to keep on the front foot all the time. So where are we now? Well, we have an OpenStack environment in 2 regions, one in Sydney, one in Adelaide. We're looking at a third now. Deployments are now down to minutes. The customer has the ability to do it all themselves. Internal communication is getting smoother. We're getting interest from more and more customers. So all in all, it's been a positive outcome. One of the more fun problems we're dealing with right now is that we keep triggering our DDoS detection platform. We have a system that's constantly looking at traffic and alerts or reroutes it based on a bunch of rules. And one of those rules is if an IP is doing way too much traffic, I think it has to exceed 2 gigabit to flag or something. We don't hit that in the traditional enterprise parts of the data center. we edit in the OpenStack side of the data center, which is a good problem to have, and also prove to naysayers that we aren't performant enough. We are performant enough. So all in all, it's been a crazy trip getting into production, and we're looking forward to continuing that journey. That's all I have for today. Does anyone have any questions?
You have time for like one or two.
One or two. No?
Thank you.
Thank you.